Hi, and welcome back for another exciting edition of B.E.P Talks, where we bring you fascinating people from all around the world doing very diverse things, but coming on so generously and sharing their expertise, their beliefs, their experiences, and their passions to educate, motivate, entertain, inspire, what have you. Today, another fascinating guest who is talking about a very, very important topic, particularly for women. And I've spoken about this quite a bit. I've done some coaching on this, and I am excited to meet myself and to introduce you to the wonderful Tanya Taylor. Please welcome Tanya. There she
Thank you.
is.
Thank you so much for having me, Beth. I'm very excited to be here and to talk about a topic that's very near and dear to me.
And I'm so excited that you're here. So I thank you very much. My true passion to be talking about one of your favorite topics, particularly when it comes to women, which is generally my main platform, finances,
Personal finance, that's correct. Yes.
personal finance.
Yes,
I know that you are a CPA
correct.
and that you have your MBA from, I know you went to Baruch and Temple University, the fabulous Temple University in Philadelphia. So you have a great body of work behind you, both educationally and experientially. What is it? Here's a loaded question. What is it that women, and I know you deal particularly with ages like 30 to 60, those formative years, if you will, for preparing for your future. What is it that we women are just not getting about understanding our finances and putting them in order, keeping them in order, and ensuring a strong financial future?
Great question. And thank you for asking that because when I was getting started with my business and thinking about, who do I want to serve the most? And I looked around, there were many of my friends, colleagues, etc., that were women that you talk to them about money and it's sort of like blah, blah, blah. Like literally, they just, the concept of personal finance for them is very foreign. It's very difficult to understand. And because of that, they are always in the state of catch up. It's
Mm,
either I have too much debt or I don't have credit, and forget it when it comes to investing. That's an area that women just do not think that they could venture into at all. And when they hear the idea of investing, like that's really foreign for them.
mm, mm,
And so as I thought about who do I want to serve, I thought it was so important to serve this demographic. I, as a woman, and especially a woman of color, because we have our own sets of issues in my community as well, which is much, much deeper, and the gap is much wider. But, I came to America at 16. I came alone. I had $100, and I thought that there was this great big dream that I would achieve when I came here, especially living in Jamaica in poverty and hearing people talk about America. But what I found when I came here was that a lot of people were living in poverty. And
mhm.
so, as we think about just women in general now, we see a lot of women that are heading up households.
Sure.
And so, a lot of the financial burden falls on them. And if they don't understand basic concept of budgeting or making sure that I have good credit, then that's sort of like where they peak. They can't
Mm,
even go beyond it to think about, okay, how do I start investing and putting
mm,
money away? Or how do I make sure that I have an emergency fund?
mm,
And therefore, for me, just shifting that mindset, I think that's one of the biggest thing is to educate women about shifting their mindset so that they can start thinking about money as a tool that they're going to use to help them to move forward so that when they get to that grand old age of retirement or young age, because we can choose to retire at any age, but so that we can prepare so that we can live the lifestyle that we want to live as opposed to always playing catch up or
mm,
feeling afraid to be able to invest. And we could get into that a little bit further. But when I think about what are the things that women are not doing, a lot of it comes down to fear and thinking that I can't do it. This is very scary. And it totally is not.
No, it's all conquerable, if you will. When you said, talking to your friends that, they were like, not hearing it, not hearing it. That's a very old way of looking at money. Years ago, generations ago, it was not ladylike to talk about money. Um, it was not something that we were speaking, we as women way back were not responsible for. It was, we had no knowledge of it. The men took care of that. So I think that it's almost natural as the next generations came that we were always playing catch up as far as the conversation about money. And that's not an excuse, but I do think it's kind of a valid reason. Why do women tend to have such a different perspective, a different attitude about money than men do? Why?
I think you touched on it. If we even think back to America, and I don't remember the exact year, but it wasn't even that long ago that a woman could just have a credit card for herself. And when a lot of women, I mean, America has been a patriarchal society for a very long time, and a lot of women relied on their husband to take care of the finances. And therefore, it's not something that they naturally had to think about. And as we go through generations, and if we've never really had to think about it in that way, then naturally it's not going to feel very natural when we need
Yeah,
to start thinking about it.
yeah.
And that's why we have to start the educational process to
Right.
remove that fear and neutralize money so that they understand that, okay, it's no different than if you're raising your child and you're saying, these are the 5 things that I have to do for my children to make my child whole and to make my child successful in life. Then this is the same way I want to think about my money. I want to think about, okay, this is how much I'm earning. What can I do with this money to make it work for me? And then start thinking about it along the lines of, okay, so what are my values? What are my goals? How do I start spending in alignment with my values? How do I start saving so that I know that down the road I have this money set aside? And one of the things that I do with clients when they come in, I remember I had this client who came in, and it was so interesting because she was my very first paid client. And when she joined my program, she kept saying to me, oh my God, I'm so scared. I don't know if I could do it. But the thing that pushed her to do it was she said her husband became ill. And when her husband became ill, he was the one that took care of everything. She had no idea if they had insurance. She had no idea how to pay the first bill. And that was even surprising to me that, in today's day and age, here was an adult who she did not know any of the bills, not even as simple as the cable bill. She didn't know. And she said, fortunately, the husband was fine. But she said, I never want to be in that position again because it was very, very scary.
Yeah.
And so for her, it was really important that she come in and she just understands. So she ended up creating a budget, and she had a lot of debt because, again, she just used her credit card and paid her credit card bill. She never paid attention to things like interest rate and how she would never be able to pay off her debt if she continued to live like that. So she learned how to manage her debt, and in the end it ended up taking her 7 months to pay off her debt. She ended up creating her own emergency fund, and she did this totally independent of her husband. She said she wanted to surprise her husband. So it was really wonderful for her, and she just became so empowered, and so she became a completely different person just by learning the basics of money. Until she went on, she started to learn to invest. But it had to take that first step. Well, first it was that fear. Like, what if something had happened to my husband? To, okay, I'm going to take this step, and just really shifting my mindset and accepting that money is a tool and it's something that I can really use. And if I understand it, then I'll be able to build whatever I want. And her goal is to become my first millionaire client. And we
Oh,
check in periodically, and she tells me how much she has in her emergency fund. She tell me how she's saving, got different jobs. So she's doing very, very well for
oh, God.
herself.
Well, good for her and good for you for helping her. You mentioned a couple of things. She just didn't know. Knowledge is power.
Yes.
And sometimes I think it's probably in our human nature to protect ourselves. If you don't know it, it doesn't exist. It's going to go away. And we learn from different experiences. In your client's case, her husband becoming ill. You mentioned fear, definitely part of it. I'm also going to mention another word, and I'd like your feeling about this: honesty. We're both New York girls. We live in a very competitive, well, New York, very competitive, but we live in a very competitive culture world. And I think sometimes that women in that competitive spirit, you see it on social media, it's
Yes.
trying to live a bigger life than you can afford to, that you really need to, but it's pushing us. It goes back to, what was the old saying, beating the Jones. What was that saying about the Joneses, the next door neighbors, all
Keeping
the
up with the
bigger,
Joneses.
keeping up with the
Yeah.
Joneses,
Yeah.
keeping up with the Marys, keeping up with the Karens, the
Yes.
bigger car, the bigger house, the prettier wardrobe. Has that created something also? Do you think there's a valid point there?
Absolutely. I think that what scares me, especially with even the younger generation now, is the idea that, so one, all of us want to be on social media and we want to present our best self. And I'll put that in quotes because what is our best self? For some people, our best self might be the designer handbag, the fancy car, the latest whatever it is. And then that's just what we're wearing and what we're driving. Then in our home, we have to have certain things. And then we take the very expensive vacations because now everyone needs to see how we're living. And that is really just such a facade. And what that ends up doing is it drives up our debt. And so we end up in this massive amount of consumer debt. Now, I am not someone that says you should never have debt, right? And so I like to compartmentalize debt. And if what you're doing is getting in debt and you're not paying off this debt, and this debt is to live a lifestyle to keep up with the Joneses, then that's going to get you in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And you talk about honesty, but that's where it comes in because you're not really even being honest with yourself.
Yes. Yes.
You're trying to live this lifestyle that's not real. And most of what we see on the internet is not real.
And that's the
And
tragedy of it. And the kids, the younger generation, they're see, I'm old enough that we didn't grow up with that. We kind of grew
yeah,
into it.
yeah,
But the younger generation growing up in it,
yeah,
God help them, because that becomes their sense of reality.
that
For
is their
me,
reality.
it was never the dangers, and we know all those. Okay, let's get back on. God, it's so much for us to talk about. Primarily, you work with women 30 to 60, and I get that. Okay, a woman in that, she's become educated in many cases. You mentioned being the head of a household in many situations, really being responsible. What are the first steps that a woman should take, other than recognizing I need to take a first step? What is that first step?
That is literally the first step though. It's
Okay.
recognizing that they need to take a step like, oh my God, I'm drowning in debt. My credit is messed up. I have no savings. I'm turning 40 or I'm turning 50 or whatever the age is. What should I do? I think that recognition is what's going to force you to take that next step. And that next step for me is a mindset shift. And that's one of the things that whenever my clients come into my program, because of course they're coming in and they want to learn about how do I fix my credit? How do I pay down my debt? How do I learn to invest? And I'm saying to them, all right, we're going to do all of that. But the very first thing that I want you to do is to go through this mindset work. And initially, it's sort of like, wait, what? But once they go through it, it's always the same response like, oh my God, I can't believe how impactful this was, because this set me on the path to the next things. Because one of the main things that we do when we go through that mindset work is to set goals. And they really have to be, you don't have to be 100% clear about your goal, right? And your goal may shift over time, but you should have a sense.
But
This is
I
my,
think
go
shifting
ahead.
goals is a good thing. I think when you shift
Yes,
goals, it's a sign of growth. It's a sign of coming into the reality of where you are at that moment. And as you're making progress, you should change your goals.
absolutely. Absolutely. And that's it. And I always say nothing is fixed. And so we start out with, okay, what are your short-term immediate goals? What do we want to accomplish here? And then what are your medium-term goals and what are your long-term goals? Always with the idea, because you're growing now, right? So maybe one of the things that happens is that you start out with the short-term goal and you have this medium-term goal. And as you're going through your short-term goal, you realize, oh, well, maybe this isn't exactly what I want for my long-term goal or even
Right,
for my medium-term goal. So you're altering it as you go along.
right.
But we come up with time frames, especially for the short-term goal. We're coming up with time frames and we're coming up with action plan. And we use the SMART goal because it works. So, you're very specific about what you want to achieve. And then how do you measure it? Is it achievable? And is it realistic? And then we're going to put a time frame on it. And so we work towards that. Then the medium term goal, we're setting it into pockets as well. So what is this medium term goal? How long we go through the same process, and then the long term goal. And we're working through that. And those small wins, sometimes it could be something really small. That is so impactful because
Yes,
that's going to now motivate you to say, oh my God, I did this. I've seen my clients so many times who do just small things. And I always say to them, celebrate the small things. We're not,
yes,
because when the things seem so big, a lot of times it's just like, oh my God, it's monumental. I can't climb this mountain. Okay, well, let's take the stairs. And once we take this one stairs and you're like, oh my God, I did this, we go to the second stairs. And
yes. I
that's what
love
I
that.
try to get them to realize. And that's why we really start with the mindset work and then move on into other things. Because quite frankly, I think the other things are going to come much easier once you've done that
Right.
shift.
Once you understand, once you, I think, surrender the overwhelm and
Yes.
face the reality that you realize it is the small steps. And
Yes.
the small steps, they add up. You can go anywhere you want to go if you just put one foot in front of the other and just
Yep.
keep moving. And finally, have goals, you know. And I think you're going to agree with me on this. So important for women, whether you're head of household or not, the example that you're setting for your kids,
Yes. Yes.
because it's often
Absolutely.
the children that are putting parents in debt. Again,
Yeah.
it goes back to that competition. It goes back to,
Yes.
whose world are we living in? Who are we trying to impress? Why are
Yeah.
we trying to impress? If
Yeah.
you and if you break everything down into small increments, get to the bottom of it all. What's the root cause, if you will? We hear that term a lot these days. Then
Yes.
it's like if you want to head east, if you want to go to someplace east, don't head west. Head
Right.
east.
Yeah.
Going in the right direction. You're much more
Correct.
likely to get there in a
Yeah.
more enjoyable and efficient way. Is it
Yeah.
ever too soon? Is it ever too late for a woman to begin to understand what is possible for her in managing her own finances? Ever too early, ever too late?
Neither. I mean, I've had a client who was 65 in my program, and there was so much that she got out of it that was helpful to her. And she continued to work because she just wasn't able to retire at 65. But there were things that we were able to start putting in place that was able to help her at least to see, okay, how do I budget because my finances are completely out of control? And how do I think about, oh, I'm 65, when can I retire? And what are these simple things that I could do right now so that at least maybe in 7 years. And fortunately for her, she was very youthful, very healthy. So she came up with a plan. Maybe she'll retire in 7 years or semi-retire in 7 years. And so for her, her goals obviously were very different from someone who's at 30, that we
Right.
have a lot more runway to be able to plan. So it really just depends on someone's financial situation and how we can, how they can work, because I could be here, I could facilitate, but at the end of the day, it's going to be their job, right? And
Sure.
so it's a matter of, it's not too late. Let's think about these things. What are the skills that you have that maybe, so maybe you're working now, but maybe there's something else that you can do to generate more income because you have all the skill set that you have gained over your, let's say, 35 years or 40 years of work experience, that maybe even though you're working a full-time job, it's not a heavy lift to do this.
Yeah.
And then for the
Yeah.
30-year-old, you also start with that. And I want to touch on the children as well. But at 30, ooh, there's so much. Like when you start there, it's just amazing how much you can achieve over a certain period of time. For myself, I started at 21. Investing in my retirement plan. Before I was 48, I already had $1 million, and I didn't start out maxing out my retirement plan. And in between that, I had children. I started saving for my children for college too. And by the time they were ready for college, their accounts were fully funded for college. So it's definitely doable. And I didn't make a ton of money. I had a good job, and I made decent money, but I always say it's not how much you make, because I have colleagues who made the same amount I did and some much more than I did, and they weren't able to achieve what I was able to achieve. It's just because of the different disciplines that we had. Um, and just to touch on the children, because you did mention that, and
Mhm.
I think unfortunately, because a lot of parents don't have the knowledge, so it's difficult to impart the knowledge on the child.
Sure.
But it's really important, like, to set boundaries with your children. Like, no, you're not going to get this $500 sneakers or this $300 sneakers, and talk to them about money. It's so taboo to talk about money, but it's once we start opening up that door and start having conversation with our children, children are very malleable. And so you start that conversation. I'll give you a quick about my children. And I started a children's financial education club when my children were probably 2 and 3. And I used to teach children about money. I would take them down to Wall Street so that they understand in their own way, and in the way I could communicate to them what Wall Street was, what investing was. But I started talking to my children at a very young age about budget. And so we'll go to the supermarket and they would ask me for something. And I would say to them, okay, this is how much is in the budget. And I would actually add up how much they would want, whatever they wanted. This is how much they want to spend. And I would say, if your budget is $10, these are the things that you could have. And as they got older and they could add for themselves, they started adding for themselves. And as they got even older, I gave them this card. It's called Green Light Card. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but it helped them tremendously because it taught them to budget. It was strict criteria on how much they could spend in certain stores. And when their money ran out, it just ran out. So before you know it, they automatically started to budget on their own. And now at 17 and 19, they still do it. So it's definitely doable if you start them young and just really keep instilling it in them, and just also just telling them, no,
And
we're
I
not
think
going to
it
buy
goes,
this.
Tanya, I think that goes way beyond the money. I think it teaches prioritizing, accountability. There are
Yes.
so many offshoots of that. That was brilliant. Good for you.
Yeah.
And I want to mention for them that you shared with me, you came here from Jamaica as a teenager with $100,
Yes.
and you had no job. Uh, and you said at 48, at the age of 48, you had $1 million saved.
Yes.
Um,
Well
so
over, but yeah.
well, good for you. Good
Yes.
for you. Um, you've mentioned a couple of times your program. Talk to us about that, please.
Sure. So I started out teaching, as I mentioned, like when I came here, like everybody around me was living paycheck to paycheck. That was a real surprise to me, because growing up in Jamaica, I just felt like America was like this land of milk and honey. And I came here and it was just like, oh no, it's not. So what I did was I started learning how, and I had very little money. My parents weren't here, it was just me. So I had to force myself to learn to budget. And so as I learned to budget, but one of the things I told myself was that I never want to go back to poverty and I never want to live paycheck to paycheck. So I would budget every time and I would save for college and I paid for my way through college debt free. And as I was budgeting, one of the things that I did is I started teaching others how to do it. And once I learned how to budget, I started to learn about credit. Then I started to learn about debt. And I started to learn about all these other things. And eventually, I would start a stock market investment club when I graduated college with a bunch of colleagues. I co-founded it with a bunch of colleagues because we knew that our paycheck alone was not going to be enough to sustain us if we wanted to build wealth. And so that's why we started that. I ran it for 6 years and sort of it's just the path that you take because you have this higher goal. And
Yeah.
my goal was to not live paycheck to paycheck, to not struggle. And so that was the path that I took. And I think I may have I don't know if I answered your question, but if I didn't, please let me know and I'll definitely elaborate.
No, you did, and beyond. So you've proven just in this short conversation, relatively speaking, um, how important mindset is. And we've done a lot this year talking about mindset, whether it's about money in particular, whether it's about goals, whether it's about your self worth, your perception of yourself and how the world perceives you. What are your beliefs? What's your mindset? And if you believe it, you believe it, and it becomes your truth. It becomes your perception is your reality. And when you make little shifts, as we spoke about earlier, and whatever that perception is, great light can come through and pathways open up to you. And I've spoken to we've coached so many people on this that they were like, oh my gosh, why didn't I do this sooner? I asked if it's ever too early, too soon or too late. I just want to say it's never too late. So if you're feeling behind a little bit, whether it's on your financial security or your mindset at all, just know how important that is and how possible big things become by making small adjustments.
Yes. Yes.
Every,
And just to add a couple of things, because I know you did ask me about my coaching program. So just
yes,
to elaborate on that, that's what it was. I kind of went off on a tangent. But so then once I started to teach individuals, once I started to learn, I started to teach. And that's how I ended up developing my coaching program because I saw that there was a huge gap for women again. And so what my program does is that it really takes you wherever you are on your financial journey and you come in and the first thing, as I mentioned before, is the mindset. But then the other things that we cover in my coaching program is how to repair your credit, how to reduce your bad consumer debt. We distinguish between good debt and bad debt and what that looks like and what you need to do. Then we start learning about investing. Like women are so scared of investing. So that's something that I get them comfortable with learning how to do. And a lot of people like simple things as what's in your retirement plan? If someone asks the average person, what's in your retirement plan? Do you understand what you're investing in? Do you understand how it works? Most people don't. So just educating people on, okay, if your company offers a retirement plan, let's see how you need to invest in it. Let's help you to understand what's inside of that so that you're making the right decision so that you could grow your portfolio at a much faster pace. We cover that as well. We also do tax planning strategies because that's really important
yes,
and could end up
yes.
saving you thousands of dollars over time, and just risk management strategies. I know we spoke a little bit offline when I shared with you that I had a car accident several years ago, and it literally just like blindsided me. Now
Mm.
I was someone, I had a great career, I was doing well, and I was also building my business. And I would say I usually keep this large emergency fund because I have this high need for security. And within no time at all, my emergency fund was completely wiped out I had all these unexpected costs that came up that, they say Murphy's Law, when one thing happens, everything
Yeah,
happens.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but before you know it, I realized how quickly you can go from feeling very financially secure to just losing it all. And I ended up writing a book about it, which is coming out in a couple of weeks, which really talks about the strategies that you need to put in place to be able to protect your finances when life throws you curveballs, because life is going to throw you curveballs.
Yes.
And even sometimes when you felt like you have a fortress around you and you've secured everything like I thought I did, I realized that there was so much more. And fortunately for me, because of the things that I had in place, I've been able to manage and to maintain. But for a lot of people, that's not something that they're able to do. And I don't want to make it sound like, oh yeah, everything was great, because it was not. We went through
Mm.
some really tough times because so many things popped up in it, during that 3 years. But
Mm.
I just think about, imagine if I had nothing in
If you didn't have-
place, what that
Right.
would have looked like for me and for so many other people.
For so many other people. And that's when it becomes so overwhelming. I want to say, because but for both of us, our platform is primarily women, and there are so many entrepreneurial women who are self-employed. They don't have retirement funds from big corporations to be part of. They don't have an employer paying toward FICA. They don't have, which is going to, affect obviously their Social Security down the road. These are women who so willing to work so hard and work with so much passion for what they believe in. What good advice, best advice can you give to entrepreneurial women who don't have those systems behind? They're kind of out there on their own, if you will.
Yes. And that's a population that I've worked with a few, but that's one of the areas that I really want to focus on going forward as well, because I feel like women are so passionate and so driven. And when we know our skills, we really know our skills and we commit to it. But a lot of time, the other piece of it is left to the side. And you've touched on a lot of it, like the no one paying for social security for them. No one paying, they don't have a long-term disability policy. So if they become disabled, how is their income going to be replaced?
And they don't have a regular paycheck
And
coming
they
in
don't
every
have
week.
yes, they have a regular paycheck. How do they budget so that they're not always robbing Peter to pay Paul, or
Right.
they're trying to play catch up? So all of those are very important components for entrepreneurial type women, to really help them to hone in on how do you set up a system in place so that you have a cushion, so that if your income goes away because something happened, you have income coming in. What kind of tax planning strategies do you have in place? And even what kind of because a lot of small business owners, when you look at their business, it's in shambles. What structures do you have around your business to make sure that it's a legitimate business? So you're not getting audited, you're not combining your business with your personal. So there's a lot of work to be done with these
Yeah.
entrepreneurial
Yeah.
type
Yeah.
of women, so that they can feel confident in their finances, just like how they feel confident providing the services that they're providing.
Yeah. And Tanya, I do a lot of training and coaching for sales, because entrepreneurial women need to know how to sell. They need to know the science, the art, the psychology, the biology of selling. And what they don't know sometimes about their own products, their numbers, their costs of their own business. You're selling a product as an example. Well, what does it cost you to produce? How do you
Right.
distribute it? What
Yeah.
are your expenses? They go, oh, it's not a numbers game. Yeah, it is a numbers game. It
Yes.
is a numbers
Yes.
game. And what I think is a great show for everybody to watch is Shark Tank, because they come at you. And when you watch it enough, I watch it like I'm watching a sporting event. I'm out there talking out loud and telling them, oh my God, you don't know your numbers and this, that, and the other thing. You watch it often enough, you see that there is a pattern. And there's a pattern because there needs to be a pattern. And
Correct.
so you're
Yeah.
talking about budget, credit, debt, all of that. There's a pattern to all of that. So
Yeah.
it reminds me, you're too young to remember possibly, but the old I Love Lucy shows where Lucy and Ethel were making something, I think it was called Vita Vegeminute or something. They were jarring something. So Ricky comes home and he asks Lucy, she has all the jars, the apothecary jars, and they're stirring up this magic potion and they're putting it in. And he said something like, well, how much are you going to make for each bottle that you sell? And she says, oh, we're not, but we're going to make it up on volume. The lunacy of that statement, it is so
Yeah.
I Love Lucy,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
so many women,
Yeah. And
it's that,
and
that
that's why
very
when I talk
core.
about, go ahead.
No, it's a very core understanding
Yeah.
as women who want to be entrepreneurs, who want to control and be in charge and everything else. But business is business, and there is a
Yes.
science to it. And as a CPA, there is not only accountability, but then you have to actually do the accounting.
Correct. And that's why when I talked about the structures, that's exactly, I probably should have elaborated. That's exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about the structures, because you have to know your number. And if you're doing all of this and you don't know, okay, how much is it costing me to do
No,
this? That's already an issue. So you got to know your number. You got to know your break even. Okay, where do I break
right,
even? When do I start making a profit? When do I
right,
say, okay, maybe this business is not the right thing, or how long do I keep it going until I realize a profit? Because a lot of times we feel so passionate about what we're doing that we forget about the numbers piece. And then we find ourselves struggling. So yeah, and I really believe that every entrepreneur should take an accounting class or take
yes,
some kind of business class to help them to just understand the basics. Okay, this is my revenue, this is my expense, this is how much it costs to produce X. And it doesn't matter what you're producing, whether it's a service or whether it's something physical, there is
right,
a cost associated with it. And you have to understand what's fixed. Every month I'm going to be paying this regardless if I make a dollar, and what's
exactly,
variable. So
exactly.
all of those things are things that business owners should know, should understand, regardless of whatever business you're in. And regardless, I know a lot of them, they hear accounting and it's like, oh my God, no, I can't do this. But it doesn't have to be the complex accounting that we do. It's just bringing it to your level so that you understand from your business perspective, these are the things that I should be
Right. Is it
looking at.
possible? Right,
These are
right,
the numbers I
right,
should be paying
right,
attention to.
right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I probably my two least favorite courses in college were accounting and management, and those are probably the two courses that I use the most um, in my daily life.
Yep.
And math. I'm a numbers person, so that's why I know how important the numbers are. Like you, we love numbers, and one and one will always only ever be two. You can't stretch it to three, and you have to deal with that reality head on. And
Yes.
you are so fascinating, and this is such an important topic for women, and the mindset, the money mindset, and the wanting to be an entrepreneur. It's like raising a child that never grows up. It's having a 24. It's a curse. I've spoken on it. I've been panelists and guest speakers, and I say entrepreneurship is a curse because you live it 20. It is. I love it. I love it. It's not for everybody. I love it, but it's a 24-hour a day commitment. It's like having a child that never grows up. You
Yeah.
must keep feeding it. It's never going to feed itself. You have to keep feeding it. You have to keep nurturing it. You have to keep raising it up. It's never going to turn 18. Well, you hope it turns 18, but it's never going to leave. It's still going to be, you want it to be with you after 18 years. It's so
And
fascinating.
I think that it, if you have certain structures in place, right, then it just makes the other pieces of it easier. But when you don't have the structures in place and you always have to be on as an entrepreneur, right? But when you have certain structures, you're like, okay, at least I don't have to worry about this because this makes sense. I just maybe need to tweak it here and there, but it's sort of self-managing. Now let me handle the real tasks at hand.
Did your parents ever leave Jamaica and come to the United States?
Yes. So I was like the, I guess, the feeder. So once I came here, and I was undocumented when I came here. I don't know if I mentioned that before. So it took me a while to become documented. And once I did, I brought my parents here, then my siblings came over, and now everyone's here, And so, and even with that, like once I brought my parents here, they were at that time a little bit older, mid 50s or 60 for my dad. So they needed a place. So one of the things that I did was I purchased a home. This again is sort of like when you talk about keeping up with the Joneses. I was 25, but I was thinking, okay, I don't want to have to go pay rent. So I ended up purchasing a home, but I didn't just purchase a one family home. I purchased a home that I could live in a part of it and rent the other
Oh,
part of it so that it could help to cover my mortgage and I could have some place for my parents. So when my parents came, they had a place to come. When my siblings came, they had a place to come until they were able to branch off to find a place of their own. But I mean, my parents, they just had like basic high school education. I must say though, to their credit, that as poor as we were, or maybe it was because as poor as we were, they were pretty good about I guess, we talked about money. And even in Jamaica growing up, I was the one at 15, 16 that would go shopping for the family and understand how to make sure that money stretched. We would always talk about how my mom makes the dollar stretch. So she would talk to us about money. And I think because we were in such poverty too, just the fact of that we had no money. So we need
yeah.
to manage the little money that we had. And I think back then I didn't think it was beneficial, but I realized coming here that probably if I didn't have that
Yeah,
sort of exposure from
absolutely.
them, I wouldn't think about money the way I did and being able to budget and things of that nature.
Well, you have so much innate financial IQ. It's in your nature. I don't know where it came from. Well, God given, you got these understandings of it, but look what you have been able to do for your family. How proud are your parents of you? I mean, wildly, I am quite sure, and your siblings, and the appreciation that you are so due. And now in your profession, helping other people. Where can listeners be in touch with you to find out more about your program and how they can engage with you to get those fundamental understandings and to just come to realize wherever you are, whatever your situation is, no matter how overwhelming it might feel to you, there is still light at the end of the tunnel. And Tanya is the lady with that light. She's holding that flashlight. She's ahead of you through the tunnel. She's lighting it up for you. How do they get in touch with you?
Sure, thank you. So yes, and there's definitely a light, no matter how daunting it feels, there is a light. I am on Instagram at growyourwealth10x.com, the number 10x.com. And then on LinkedIn, you could find me, Tanya Taylor, CPA, MBA as well. And I recently wrote a book. So I think that I just want to show, it's called Broke to Wealth. And this is actually a book that really talks about, building your financial core. And it walks you through steps that you can take in order to start building wealth. It teaches you how to align your spending with your values, mindset. There's actually exercises that goes along with it, and really speaks to different aspects of wealth building. And it's on Amazon. And it's interesting because I was reading some of the reviews this weekend, and there was a college student who was saying, oh my God, this is so great because it breaks it down so easily for me.
Yeah.
And even though I'm in college, I understand it. And I read someone who's like 50 who is saying, oh my God, this is where I am in my life. And this book has been able to help me to really grasp concepts and figure out, okay, what are some of the things that I want to invest in? And that was the idea of the book. When I wrote it, I really wanted it to speak to someone, regardless of where they are on their journey, so that they could really start taking pieces out of it and start applying it to their lives. I really believe in taking the time to implement things instead of just reading and saying, oh, this was good.
Right.
Just really.
Well, I said earlier, knowledge is power, and it is, but it's powerless unless you put it into action.
Yes.
So
yes.
gain the knowledge and then take the action, as you said, put it into. This has been such a wonderful conversation and so important, particularly for women, for female entrepreneurs, women who are head of household. Please connect with Tanya, just as you see her name there, Tanya Taylor, CPA, MBA on LinkedIn. Her book, Broke to Wealth, is available on Amazon. And tell me your Instagram handle
At
again.
Grow Your Wealth, the number 10x.
Grow Your Wealth 10x.
Grow Your Wealth 10x. No .com.
10x. Fascinating. I want to connect with you again, and I want to help bring more empowerment to women so that they can really get started no matter where they are on their biological calendar, their chronological calendar, whatever it may be, to know that there are still steps that they can take for better outcomes. Tanya, I thank you so much for this wealth, no pun intended, this true wealth of information. Brilliant. And I am so in awe of you. Truly.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Beth. And thank you for having me. This was a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it. And I hope the audience will get a lot out of it.
What you get out of it, it was one of my least favorite college courses, management information systems.
That's right.
Input equals output. So what you put in is what you're going to get out. So let's help direct more listeners to where the good input will give better output. That's management information systems. One of my least favorite classes, probably because it was like at 7:30 in the morning or something, barely awake when you had to be in the classroom. But it really did teach me so much. So we're going to connect again. I know that for sure, Tanya. Again, I appreciate you beyond my words here of what you have accomplished and what you are helping others to realize is possible, and then also for them to accomplish.
Excellent. Thanks, Beth. And I look forward to connecting with you again as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As we always say on B.E.P Talks, may the best always be yet to come. And I say that because I believe it so much, but we have to be part of that. We have to take the action to cause the best to come, to appear, to become part of our daily lives and our legacy. So may the best always be yet to come. And may you be willing to take the steps toward making that possible. Please, it's never impossible. Live until you die. I spoke with someone last week. You got to just keep working until you've reached whatever the goal is that you've reached. So we can go on and on, but I appreciate everybody's attention to this. Tanya, thank you so much again. And for everybody from B.E.P Talks and the Global Society of Empowered Women, until we talk again, bye for now.